Number 10. The West Mesa Bone Collector from 2001 to 2005. The West Mesa murderers are the killings of 11 women whose remains were found buried in 2009 in the desert on the West Mesa of Albuquerque, New Mexico, United States. Several suspects have been named, but none were arrested or charged, and a serial killer was believed to be responsible. However, it is now believed to be evidence of a smaller North American chapter of a larger global sex trafficking ring. Authorities were able to track the murders to a larger sex trafficking ring from Central America, operating through neighboring Texas, that targets sex workers during events throughout the Southwest, Southern, and Western United States, especially regularly scheduled events, such as the New Mexico State Fair in this case, to take advantage of reliably heavier traffic. This small fragment of a human trafficking ring involves numerous population centers, including Las Vegas in Nevada, El Paso and Killeen in Texas, and Denver in Colorado. Number 9. The Atlanta Ripper in 1911. The Atlanta Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who is suspected of killing at least 15 Atlanta women in 1911 and 1912. On May 28, 1911, the body of Belle Walker, an African cook, was found 25 yards from her home on Garibaldi Street in Atlanta by her sister after she failed to return home from work the previous night. Her throat had been cut by an unknown slayer, and the crime was reported in the Atlanta Constitution under the headline "Negro Woman Killed. No Clue to Slayer." On June 15, another black woman, Addie Watts, was found with her throat slashed, followed on June 27 by Lizzie Watkins. The search for the serial killer, called the Atlanta Ripper by the press, found 6 different suspects, but no convictions were ever made, nor was the crime ever solved. By the end of 1911, 15 women, all black or dark-skinned, all in their early 20s, had been murdered in the same manner. The Ripper may have had as many as 21 victims, but there is no conclusive proof that the murders were carried out by one person. Number 8. Jack the Stripper from 1964 to 1965. The Hammersmith Nudes Murders is the name of a series of 6 murders in West London, England, in 1964 and 1965. The victims, all prostitutes, were found undressed in or near the River Thames, leading the press to nickname the killer Jack the Stripper, a reference to Jack the Ripper. 2 earlier murders, committed in West London in 1959 and 1963, have also been linked by some investigators to the same perpetrator. Despite intense media interest and one of the biggest manhunts in Scotland Yard's history, the case remains unsolved. Forensic evidence gathered at the time is believed to have been destroyed or lost. Number 7. The Phantom Killer in 1946. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, a term coined by the news media, were a series of unsolved murders and other violent crimes committed in and around Texarkana in the spring of 1946 by an unidentified serial killer known as the Phantom Killer or Phantom Slayer. The killer is credited with attacking 8 people within 10 weeks, 5 of whom were killed. The attacks happened on weekends between February 22, 1946, and May 3, 1946. The first 2 victims, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Larry, survived. The first double murder, which involved Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, happened 4 weeks later. The second double homicide, involving Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, occurred exactly 3 weeks after the first murders. Finally, almost exactly 3 weeks later, Virgil Starks was killed and his wife, Katie, was severely wounded. The murders sent the town of Texarkana into a state of panic throughout the summer. At dusk, city inhabitants heavily armed themselves and locked themselves indoors while police patrolled streets and neighborhoods. Although many businesses lost customers at night, stores sold out of guns, ammunition, locks, and many other protective devices. Several rumors began to spread, including that the killer was caught, or that a third and even fourth double homicide had been committed. Most of the town people hid in fear inside their houses or hotels, sometimes even leaving town. Some youths took matters into their own hands by trying to bait the phantom, so they could kill him. The disappearance of Virginia Carpenter, a cold case in Texarkana in 1948, has been speculated as the work of the phantom. After 3 months without the phantom attacks, the Texas Rangers slowly and quietly left town to keep the phantom from believing he was safe to strike again. The murders were reported nationally and internationally by several publications. Number 6. The Servant Girl Annihilator from 1884 to 1885. The Servant Girl Annihilator, also known as the Austin Axe Murderer, was an unidentified American serial killer who preyed upon the city of Austin, Texas, between 1884 and 1885. The series of 8 axe murders were referred to by contemporary sources as the Servant Girl Murders. The December 26, 1885 issue of the New York Times reported that the murders were committed by some cunning madman, who was insane on the subject of killing women. The murders represent an early example of a serial killer operating in the United States, 3 years before the Jack the Ripper murders in Whitechapel. According to author Philip Sugden in The Complete History of Jack the Ripper, the conjecture that the Texas Killer and Jack the Ripper were one and the same man originated in October 1888, when an editor with the Atlanta Constitution proposed this conjecture, following the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes by Jack the Ripper. Number 5. Oakland County Child Killer from 1976 to 1977. The Oakland County Child Killer is the name given to the perpetrator responsible for the serial killings of at least 4 children in Oakland County, Michigan, United States between 1976 and 1977. The victims were held captive before being killed, and forensic DNA testing has indirectly implicated 2 suspects, one of whom has since died, with the other serving life in prison for offenses against children. A DNA profile created from samples taken from some of the victims' bodies is from the main perpetrator, but does not match the DNA of anyone named in connection with the case, which makes the perpetrator's identity to remain unknown. Number 4. Charlie Chopoff, from 1972 to 1973. Charlie Chopoff is the pseudonym given to an unidentified American serial killer known to have killed 3 black children and 1 Puerto Rican child in Manhattan between 1972 and 1973. This assailant is also known to have attempted to murder 1 other child. All the victims of this assailant were male, and the majority of murders committed by this individual involved the genital mutilation or attempted genital mutilation of the victims. While the case is still considered an open one, Erno Soto was held as a suspect and confessed to one of the murders, but was considered unfit for trial and sent back to a mental institution. Number 3. The Long Island Serial Killer from 1996 to 2010. The Long Island Serial Killer is an unidentified suspected serial killer who is believed to have murdered 10 to 16 people over a period of nearly 20 years. Mostly prostitutes, and left their bodies in areas on the south shore of Long Island, New York. The victims were found along the Ocean Parkway, near the remote beach towns of Gilgo and Oak Beach in Suffolk County, and the area of Jones Beach State Park in Nassau County. The remains of 4 victims were found in December 2010, while 6 more sets of remains were found in March and April 2011. Police believe the latter sets of remains predate the 4 bodies found in December 2010. On May 9, 2011, authorities surmised that 2 of the newest sets of remains might be the work of a second killer. On November 29, 2011, the police stated their belief that 1 person is responsible for all 10 deaths. They also had concluded that the case of Shannon Gilbert, an escort who disappeared before the first set of bodies were found, was not related. It is clear that the area in and around Gilgo Beach has been used to discard human remains for some period of time, said then Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spada. Number 2. Jack the Ripper in 1888. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in the largely impoverished areas in and around the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. In both the criminal case files and contemporary journalistic accounts, the killer was called the Whitechapel Murderer and Leather Apron. Attacks ascribed to Jack the Ripper typically involved female prostitutes who lived and worked in the slums of the East End of London. Their throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations. The removal of internal organs from at least 3 of the victims led to proposals that their killer had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Rumors that the murders were connected intensified in September and October 1888, and numerous letters were received by media outlets and Scotland Yard from individuals purporting to be the murderer. The name Jack the Ripper originated in a letter written by an individual claiming to be the murderer that was disseminated in the media. The letter is widely believed to have been a hoax and may have been written by journalists in an attempt to heighten interest in the story and increase their newspaper's circulation. The From Hell letter received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee came with half of a preserved human kidney, purportedly taken from one of the victims. The public came increasingly to believe in a single serial killer known as Jack the Ripper, mainly because of both the extraordinarily brutal nature of the murders and media coverage of the crimes. Number 1. The Zodiac Killer from 1960s to 1970s. The Zodiac Killer, or simply Zodiac or the Zodiac, is the pseudonym of an American serial killer who operated in Northern California from at least the late 1960s to the early 1970s. The unidentified killer originated the name in a series of taunting letters and cards sent to the San Francisco Bay Area press. These letters included 4 cryptograms or ciphers. The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in Benicia, Vallejo, Napa County, and San Francisco, respectively, between December 1968 and October 1969. He targeted young couples, with 2 of the men surviving attempted murder. The Zodiac himself once claimed to have murdered 37 victims, and he has been linked to several other cold cases. The San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive in April 2004, but reopened it at some point prior to March 2007. The case also remains open in the city of Vallejo, as well as in Napa County and Solano County. The California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac murders since 1969. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment and share, and also don't forget to hit the notification icon.